Anderson, Brown, Carmichael. We have apologies from Councillor Chalmers, and Councillor McDougall is attending as a substitute. We have present Councillors Clark, Clonferry. We don't have Councillor Cooper in the meeting at the moment. We have present Councillors Cowan, Devlin, Fagan, Ferguson Miller. We have apologies from Councillor Frame. We have apologies from Councillor Keat and Councillor Cowie substituting. We have present Councillors Kerr, Lambie, Logan. We have apologies from Councillor Loudon and Councillor Johnson-Dempsey substituting. We have present Councillors McCarlin, McClement, Leslie MacDonald, McLachlan. We have apologies from Councillor Nelson and Councillor McCreary substituting. And we have present Councillors Ray, Razak, Robb, Ross, Shearer and Walker. And I'll hand you back to the Chair. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Before we come to today's business, I have been asked to note that today is International Guide Dogs Day. And of course, the committee will be aware that guide dogs are one of the nominated causes as part of the Touch of Life Make a Difference appeal. And this day takes place annually on the last Wednesday of April. Can I come now to item 1, which is declarations of interest? Are there any declarations? There are none. Can I come now to item 2, which are the minutes of the previous meeting? Are there any questions on the minutes of the previous meeting? I don't see any questions on the minutes of the previous meeting, so can we agree these as a correct record? Agreed. We're agreed. Come now to item 3, which is our revenue budget monitoring paper, and I'll come to Jackie Taylor to speak to the report. Jackie.
Thank you, Chair. This is our Revenue Budget Monitoring Report, which takes us up to the 21st of February 2025. If I take you to section 4 of the report, as previously reported, we have discussed previously at committee our 24-25 probable outturn position, and that was an underspend of £13.7 million. Covered at section 4.2 of the report was the agreement that members previously gave around how those reserves would be treated. £7.9 million of the underspend from a loans fund review would be transferred to reserves to support the budget strategy going forward, and the remainder was to be used for one-off investments in 2025-26, and that was agreed as part of the budget decisions in February. If I take you to section 5 of the report, this reports that we are still in the same position as was reported previously at our probable outturn time. And at section 6 of the report, the housing revenue account position is noted, and that continues to be a break-even position expected for the year. The appendices to the report show the detailed figures for each of our services and also show the year-to-date actual spend in the right-hand columns of appendices 1 and 2. If I take you back to the recommendations, we're asking that the Council's break-even position on the probable outturn after transfer to reserves be noted, and that the actual spend at the 21st of February for the General Fund and for the Housing Revenue Account is also noted. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions on this report? I don't see any questions, so can we agree the report? Agreed. Come now to item 4, which is the capital budget monitoring paper, and Jackie, back to you.
Thank you. So this is now the capital budget monitoring paper, again taking us to the 21st of February this year. Section 4 discusses the General Fund Capital Programme. We have a Capital Fund Programme for a General Fund of £69.8 million. The forecast is detailed at the bottom of page 19, and we are forecasting the final year-end position to be £59 million of spend. We are still in the process of completing our year-end position, and we are looking to try and maximise spend as much as possible for the year. We will report back to committee on the 25th of June with our year-end position. The housing programme is discussed at section 5 of the report. The housing capital programme for the year is £77.2 million. The forecast as at the reporting date was £71.2 million. So that's a £6 million underspend anticipated, and that was predominantly due to the supply in the housing market around acquisitions. That was in January. We do believe that position will be recovered slightly, and again we'll report the year-end position back to committee on the 25th of June. So again, in terms of recommendations, we're asking that the position for the General Fund and the Housing Capital Programme be noted, and that the programmes will continue to be monitored by the Financial Resources Scrutiny Forum. Thank you.
Thank you, Jackie. Can I ask if there are any questions on that report? I'm not seeing any questions, so can we agree the report? Agreed. Thank you. We'll come now to item 5. Now, item 5 is a paper on the employability promise, and in just a moment I'm going to ask David Booth to speak to the paper. However, I wanted to advise the committee that we are today joined by 2 members of the Champions Board Sophie Lee McKechnie and Rebecca Watupa, who have been helping to shape the employability promise that's set out in this item on your agenda packs. And I know that they will be keen to follow with interest how this develops in the months ahead and remain part of progressing this policy should it be agreed today by the committee. So I'd like you to join me in welcoming them to the committee, and I would like to come to David now to speak to the paper.
Thank you very much, Chair. And I'm joined this morning by Douglas Hashigan, the Council's Employability Manager, who's been heavily involved in developing the Employability Promise. In terms of the purpose of the report, it's to set out the proposal for the development and implementation of an Employability Promise for care-experienced young people. In terms of background, an independent care review sat from 2018 to 2020 to consider how to best promote the well-being of children and young people who are care experienced in Scotland. The results set a number of reports and recommendations collectively known as the Promise, which is a commitment from civil society and public services in Scotland to improve the lives of care experienced children. Care experience is a term that describes circumstances of children and young people who are involved with social work to support their home life, and is an umbrella term which also includes children and young people who live with relatives because of a breakdown in their family situation. In response to the Promise, South Lanarkshire developed a collective corporate approach which took forward the Promise and through a plan which has 4 main areas of focus: a good childhood, whole family support, supporting the workforce, and planning building capacity. The Promise Board is chaired by the Chief Executive and intended by Chief Officers across partner agencies and works closely with South Lanarkshire's Champions Board, which engages with all partners to place the lived experience of care experienced people at the heart of decision making and resource allocation. The Council currently has a range of employability supports and processes to support care experienced young people to progress to sustainable, positive destinations of employment of further learning. The support provided is individually tailored and involves personal development, employability group work, vocational training, health and well-being, work placements and processes that are in place to track the destinations of care experienced young people aged 16 to 19. In terms of the current situation, in March of this year, there were 364 care experienced young people aged between 16 and 19 being tracked through this process. The table in 3.1 of the report, 3.10 of the report, sets out the current status of these 364 young people. Section 4 of the report highlights previous initiatives, and in recent years programmes have been developed specifically to support increased numbers of care experienced young people to access employment opportunities within the Council, the details of which are contained within the various sections within Section 4 of the report. Section 5 of the report outlines the proposed Council Care Experienced Young People Employment Promise, which provides increased opportunities for care experienced young people to progress to Council employment. And in line with aspirations of the Champions Board, a care experience promise is proposed as set out in Section 5.2 of this report. And this includes a promise that all care experienced young people will have a named key worker from 6 months prior to leaving school to the age of 24 and beyond if required. That the Council will track the destinations of all care experienced young people in partnership with Skills Development Scotland and regularly contact young people who are not participating in education, training or employment to offer support. That for those young people interested in pursuing a career with the Council, we will provide work placements to give young people experience in Council workplaces and roles. That where young people are interested in applying for Council vacancies, we will provide pre-employment work placements that can be used to demonstrate their work readiness and competence. And where young people move into employment with the Council through this route, appropriate supports will be put in place that take account of the individual circumstances of the care experienced young people. Section 3 of the report proposes how we will deliver on this employability promise. And this will be through the role of key workers who will provide a level of support determined by the young person and which may vary from light touch to tracking to intensive key work support. It will include work placements, including all young people having an identified placement supervisor who will provide day-to-day support and management and liaise closely with the young person's key worker. And it will involve recruitment, where the Council will look at evidence gathering for the young person's placement and the use of as evidence of competency in place of an interview where it's appropriate to do so. In terms of communication, the Champions Board have consulted on the development of the employability promise with the Champions Board, and we will continue to involve its delivery, including supporting the development of an action plan to ensure that all care experienced young people are made aware of and supported to take up the employability promise. As covered in section 7 of the report, it is planned that a short life working group is established to oversee the further development and implementation of the employability promise, and the next steps are outlined in section 7.1 of the report. In terms of the employee implications, the delivery of the promise will require some flexibilities in the application of recruitment policies as part of the Council's corporate pairing duties, and processes are in place to consider these and implement them. Personnel Services have been involved in the development of the employability promise and will be represented on the Short Life Working Group. In terms of financial implications, the delivery cost for the promise will be met from the Council's external employability funding, including the Scottish Government No One Left Behind and UK Government Share Prosperity funding. And the posts identified for young people to progress within will come from existing vacancies only. With that, I'll take you back to the recommendations of the report as outlined in section 2, and the recommendation is that the proposal to develop and implement an employability promise for care experienced young people be approved. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, David. Can I ask if there are any questions in this paper? Could you indicate now, please? Could I come to Ross Clark?
Thank you, Chair. More of a comment than a question, mostly, and also thank you to David for the report. Mostly just to welcome this. I think it's certainly really positive to see that we're, doing more on our work to keep the promise and supporting our care experienced young people into employment. I know that's been, care experienced young people often do face that barrier in terms of accessing employment, and it's really good to see that we've got kind of concrete actions in this. All the time when you see these pledges, it's not always followed up by kind of concrete action, but it's good to see that in here and that we're taking into account the views of care experienced young people. So it was just to welcome this work that is going on. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for those comments. Could I come now to Robert Brown?
Thanks very much, Chair. I think this is a hugely important report. I mean, we've come to this issue a number of times over the years, but it's important, I think, from two sides. First of all, I think it's at 310, the figures about the current status of young people in the survey is quite clear. There's a considerable gap of people who are kind of escaping the system and are ending up with difficulties in their lives or whatever that mean that they're not in employment, education or training. And there's a big gap between the experience of care experienced young people and others in that particular context. But there's another side to the coin, which is the actual needs of our society and economy for the young people, because we hear right across the board these days of recruitment challenges in all sorts of different areas, from parks employers to employment to right through to doctors and everything in between. The economy needs young people, it needs everybody signed up to being part of that economy, and I think it's hugely important we actually make a success of this particular project. And I think the other final point I would make is behind the kind of statistics and the kind of proposals here, there really lies the issue of stickability, as it was described to me at one point. We've got to stick with young people, we've got to make sure they have the proper support and that they are able to go through the transition to work and to higher education, further education, in a way which is actually successful for them. And I think all the experience suggests that the level of support we put into that is actually crucial to making this particular thing successful. Thanks very much, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Could I come now to Margaret Walker?
Thanks, Chair. I won't repeat what's been said, but yeah, just to welcome the report. I think it looks like a really excellent model, particularly the key worker aspect to it, and also the kind of three-pronged approach in terms of employment, housing, the whole person nurtured approach. And I think it would be really, really useful to see how this progresses and how it evaluates, because I know that there is a significant package of support is going to come from the UK government in relation to young people and young adults that are economically inactive. And I think this, with some variations, looks like a really good model that could be, adapted to that. I'm not sure how the mechanics of that are going to work, whether that's going to be devolved to local authorities. But in terms of the comments that Robert made, in terms of economic value and benefit, to having all these people contribute to society and the difference it will make to their lives, I think it'll be really interesting to see how this model rolls out and evaluates. But I particularly think the key worker thing and the support level that's going to be there is going to make an impact. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much. Could I come to Maura Zack?
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, I echo everything that's been said. I think it's a great piece of work. The question I have for David is care experienced young people. How many do we have currently in the council working?
Okay. David or Douglas, either of you wanted David?
So, quite honestly, I don't know that number at this particular moment, but I certainly can find out, Councillor Razak.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, hang on a second here. I'm going to come to the Chief Exec.
Councillor Razak, it's a really interesting point, right? And there are care experienced young people working within the council. There are care experienced young people who we are aware of, but there are care experienced young people that we don't, right? Who make their way into employment that we don't have. So that's actually an exercise that we've been looking at in terms of making sure that everybody's experience is taken into account and how we understand this. But I'll try and get a bit more detail and come back to you on that. Okay.
Okay, thank you very much. And can I come now to Alec Allison?
Thanks, Chair. Firstly, just associate myself with the positive comments that have been made already and not spend time repeating them. But I think the table 1 at 310 actually highlights the job that we've got in hand. I seem to remember a lot of education reports coming out with well over 90% of pupils going on to positive destinations. And although this isn't a direct correlation, with 27% of our pupils here negative or unknown, and within that, 32 people we do not know what they're doing at the moment. We see through the paper how we're going to support employment, etc. What are we doing to try and identify where these 32 people seem to have gone, dropped off the system? Because that would seem to be a very important issue.
Douglas is going to pick that one up.
Yeah, thanks very much. So within our team, we do a kind of range of tracking for young people with a particular focus on care experience young people. We do this for all young people in the kind of 16 to 19 cohort that have been engaged in our services, where we're not a passive service in terms of waiting for people to come and refer to us or be referred. We actually physically go out and chat their doors, phone them up, work with schools and partners to try and find out what they're doing. So I think that's the challenges that's ongoing. There's a lot of young people kind of changing address and moving around. So we really do everything that we can to try and make sure that that number is as low as possible. It's a kind of hard shift doing that for our team. So they're out on an 8-weekly basis doing essentially kind of door-knocking exercises and working closely with social work to identify the young people. I think the crucial thing is that when young people are at a stage of being able to engage, that they know that we're here and we can kind of support them and provide them with that key work support. But it's a big piece of work for us.
Okay, thank you. I'm not seeing any other questions, so can I just make the point that I think I want to, I'm sure as we all would recognise the young people themselves who've been involved in the development of the employability promise, and it is good to have them along today. Also want to recognise not just the employability service and the services that are immediately working with them, but actually, as the report makes clear, for this to work, we need that collaboration across services in the council, and we're going to have to make sure we're continually making sure there's visibility of the employability promise across services, but absolutely want to recognise their work. And I think to come back to the first point, I think it was Councillor Clark's point, what we've got here actually is quite a practical report, very progressive outcomes. We know what we're seeking to do to change society and to change people's lives, but actually with some very practical measures and a very practical report that sits behind it. So well done to everyone who's been involved in bringing that together today. Could I draw us back to the recommendations and could ask that we, can we agree those recommendations?
Agreed.
We're agreed. Thank you very much. I'm now going to come to item 6, which is the outcome of the consultation on proposals to realign the catchment areas at Glengowan, Mackinhill and Robert Smiley Primary Schools in Lark Hall. And Anne Donaldson is going to speak to this paper. Anne.
Thank you, Chair. The purpose of this report is to provide information on the consultation undertaken on the proposal to change the catchment areas of Glengowan, Mackinhill and Robert Smiley Primary Schools to better align new housing developments in Lark Hall to the school geographically closer and to balance pupil numbers more effectively, and to seek approval from committee to implement the proposal as stated following publication of the consultation outcome report. Section 3, paragraph 3.1 refers to the current catchment areas for Glengowan, Mackinhill and Robert Smiley Primary Schools detailed in Appendix 1. It describes that the boundary arrangement is a historic one that, due to changes in housing and population distribution over time, requires to be redrawn to link housing areas more appropriately to each of the primary schools and more equitably balance the pupil population. Paragraph 3.2 refers to Appendices 2 to 4, which show the proposed new catchment zones, including the 2 main housing development areas within Lark Hall that are currently within Mackinhill Primary School's catchment area, but are geographically closer to Glengowan and Robert Smiley Primary Schools. School roles and projections are detailed in paragraph 3.3, and members are asked to note that while the speed of completions of the new developments have slowed over the past few years due to the impact of the pandemic and other economic factors, the overall number of houses to be built is expected to remain as previously outlined. Paragraphs 3.4 and 3.5 detail the impact of the catchment realignments on projected school roles and with consideration given to school capacities. Section 4 describes the statutory consultation that was undertaken in line with the Schools Consultation Scotland Act 2010, and Appendix 5 is a full copy of the consultation outcome report, including comments from Education Scotland. And paragraph 4.2 highlights that despite combined school rolls of 800, the total number of written responses was very low and totalled 46. Members are asked to note the mitigations set out in paragraph 4.6, which notes that each school continues to have capacity to allow placing requests to be considered, and that this can support families who may not wish for the catchment realignment to proceed. In addition, families with children already attending these schools during session 25 to 26, and with a further sibling enrolling in Primary 1 in any school session from August 26 through to August 31, will have the choice to have their child placed in that school, regardless of catchment changes. Paragraph 4.8 notes that the issue of safe routes to schools highlighted by Education Scotland has been and will be addressed through work with colleagues in community and enterprise resources. Section 5 highlights employee implications whereby the deployment of employee resources would continue to be implemented within existing staffing protocols. And Section 8 provides consideration of other implications and confirms in paragraph 8.1 that implementation of catchment realignment would be during Primary 1 enrolment in January 26 for action in sessions 26-27. Paragraph 8.3 confirms that there would be no impact on secondary school numbers as the affected schools are already zoned to Lark Hall Academy. Turning to the recommendations then, in section 2 of the report, committee is asked to approve the following recommendations. After considering the published consultation outcome report in full, that the catchment areas of Glengowan, Mackinhill and Robert Smiley Primary Schools be changed to better align new housing developments in Lark Hall to the school geographically closer and to balance pupil numbers more effectively, and that the proposal be effective from the start of school session in August 2026. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much for that report. Can I ask if there are any questions? And could I come to David Shearer?
Thank you, Chair. Myself and Councillor Logan and Councillor Hamilton attended a meeting at Crawford Dyke Primary where the catchment areas were discussed for Carluke. And I would like to ask Anne, A, how long does this process normally take? And would she be considering the primary schools within Carluke, where we've had a large growth area to the west of the town, which has had an unbalanced effect on certain primaries? Thank you, Chair.
Well, I would admire your effort to raise an issue of relevance to Carluke. I think the issue is before us is the issue of Lark Hall. So I'm going to, if it's all right with you, just leave that one there and see if there are any questions on the paper as it stands in front of us. And Councillor Shearer, feel free to rephrase your question in a more helpful way.
I highlighted the situation in Carluke to ask the question, how long does this process normally take?
Very clever of you to do so. So, Anne, if you want to come back and answer that question about the typical timescales, yeah.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor. It would normally take normally a year to go through the full consultation, publicise the report, go through the committee cycles that are required to put this in place. We are aware of the Carluke situation and we are, addressing that as well. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Are there any other questions about Lark Hall? Right, okay. No. If there's no other... Oh, sorry, there are now. Can I come to Councillor MacDonald?
Thanks, Chair. I just feel I've got to come in this. It's been a huge issue regarding the fact that Lark Hall has become extremely popular over the last few years, and the rezoning, as David is well aware, the rezoning of schools is something that we've been crying out for long enough, and I welcome this. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much. I suppose all I would say in conclusion is that I think the two things that stand out for me in the report are that when there is a sort of, in response to the Education Scotland report, actually there has also been able to demonstrate that we believe that there are educational benefits in this proposal, that it's delivering what Education Scotland are looking for. And also I think it really does stand out to me that 75% of the pupils in the CGA who are attending Glengowan are there on a placing request. So I think although there's been a very low number of responses to the consultation, actually, if you look deeper, we can see evidence of parents sort of voting with their feet. So, listen, can I bring us back to the recommendations and can I ask, are we content to approve those recommendations?
Agreed.
We are agreed. Thank you very much. I'm going to come now to item 7. Which is the mid-term review of the Council Plan, and Tom Little is going to speak to this report. Tom.
Thanks, Chair. Good morning, everyone. As you say, this report brings before you the outcomes, the results of our mid-term review of the Council Plan Connect. In terms of background, as members know, the Council Plan is our overarching high-level strategic document from which comes our resource plans and other plans. And they set out the Council's vision and values, identifying our priorities and outlining the outcomes that we are seeking. So typically we look to review the contents at the mid-term point of the plan to check everything remains relevant, and this report today brings you the context of this review and the summaries of the resultant changes. So section 4 provides a summary of the contents and structure of the 22 to 27 Council Plan, and that includes the plan and a page graphic that you'll see at the top of page 78 in your papers. Section 5 opens with a reminder that we carried out a very extensive consultation exercise in 2022 to ensure that our local residents were involved in designing the Council Plan and also the Community Plan, which is a sister publication for it. So in view of those very strong foundations, the approach taken in the mid-term review has been to confirm the relevance of the Council's vision, values and outcomes, while sharpening the focus where necessary on our priorities. So as a result of that, the mid-term review does not change the core elements that you approved in 22 of the current Council Plan. but it has increased the focus on certain key elements, bearing in mind the changing context we find ourselves in. And those are laid out for you at section 5.4, that's page 79 of your papers. The first of those is no stranger to you, the financial challenges facing local government. The second one is messages around transformation and service design. And the third one is our emphasis on tackling poverty and inequalities. So as part of the review, we undertook a further smaller consultation exercise, which has backed, generally speaking, the Council's vision, priorities and outcomes, and that's laid out for you at 5.6 in your papers. So the results are the revised updated plan, which is attached to Appendix 1 to this report, and you'll remember I actually sent a version of this to you on the 26th of February to coincide with the start of the public consultation exercise. We've also provided a summary of the changes in the table at 5.7 in your report here. And in general, it points to changes throughout, in some cases quite significant changes and work's gone into it. And I bring your attention to a new section, the changing context, and also the most significant updates I would suggest are at our priorities and our outcomes, again, taking into account especially those three items I just highlighted to you. So it's here for your approval, and as ever, happy to take any questions you might have.
Okay, thank you very much, Tom. Can I ask if there are any questions on this paper? And could I come to Kirsten Robb?
Thank you. Morning, everyone. Yep, thanks, Tom, for the report. I did have a wee thought in 5.4. It's one of the issues that we're also starting to see increasing impact of is climate-related severe weather impacts on the council. And I wonder if people agreed if that could be added in, because it's definitely an issue we're seeing more of, whether it's storms or impact on housing and things like that. The other aspect of that as well is to think about how the council plan further aligns with the community plan. There used to be a sustainability partnership that sat under the community planning partnership. That was disbanded. So we lost the connection with some of that key sustainability expertise coming into community planning. I know the council has done some work with community planning to map sustainability, but I think having that higher level expertise and consistent input into the community planning partnership would be good. And I wondered if yourself as a community planning partnership chair would take this up and see how we can get that consistent and high level input, whether it's some of the agencies that deal with sustainability.
Okay, I'll come back to that in just a second, but I don't know if, Tom, do you want to pick up and answer in the first instance?
Yeah, happy to. Good points. Thank you very much, Councillor Robb. In terms of your first point, yes, as you well know, the climate is one of the priorities in the report, and the Council Plan has been since 2022. I'm more than happy with the committee's approval to look at the wording and including a reference such as that you've just suggested. On the second point, you raised a similar point. I think it was at Climate Change Committee, and I know a response is being prepared for you, and we'll be coming to you very soon on exactly that point, if that's of any help.
Thank you.
Okay, and I will say I think there are a number of existing strategies. I'm thinking about the adaptation strategy that is referenced in the report, where we've actually got examples of practice that we could probably give greater visibility to. So in terms of that first point that's been raised, say just in terms of the second point that's been raised, again, that is one I'm happy to pick up and explore. The community planning partnership throughout over recent years, we have expanded its membership. So we have brought on board organisations such as Seniors Together. Obviously, South Lanarkshire Leisure and Culture did not previously have a role in the community planning partnership, and that's changed. So we're quite content to make an offer to other partners and then look at what the consequences with that would be in terms of how we organise the community planning partnership and the bodies that sit beneath it. And indeed, we've just yesterday undergone a self-evaluation process with the improvement service. So continuing to evaluate what we do as a partnership is important. I'm happy to take forward the suggestion that has been raised. Can I come now to Councillor Allison?
Thanks, Joe. On page 107, Tom, you're highlighting all the things that the council will do to achieve these outcomes. It is a very full list, and it covers but all of the points will cover all of the parts of South Lanarkshire. You highlight what needs that you need to help to create town centres for a social, cultural and economic heart. A lot of that can be said for the rural area as well, and it's very disappointing that that's not specifically mentioned here. Because although a lot of these things do cover the rural area as well, there are specific issues about how we deal with development, etc. for one in the rural area, and that's not here at all, and it's missing out a huge chunk of South Lanarkshire by doing that.
Tom?
It's a fair point well made, Councillor Allison, but I would just point out that this is the council plan and it tends to take a pan-South Lanarkshire approach. We don't tend to focus in on localities, but those will be picked up on resource plans, for example, which are, as you know, updated annually, and on specific service plans, and indeed such things as rural task force plans, etc., things like that.
Okay, and could I come now to Councillor Brown?
Very much. We heard earlier on the issues about care experienced young people. I was just looking at the sort of sections that deal with young people in that connection. There is a particular reference to supporting care experience to achieve positive learning outcomes and positive destinations. Does that need to be drawn out, and any kind of elaboration on that, given the kind of promise we made earlier on?
I think part of the answer lies in what I just gave to Councillor Allison, that these, I would expect things like that to be picked up in resource plans and in other plans that sit beneath the resource plans too. However, if it perhaps is another offer here, we almost immediately go from looking at the mid-term review of this council plan to planning ahead for the next council plan we'll put before you. So it's certainly something we could pick up and make a point of focusing on that and the thinking for that.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, can I bring us back to the recommendations if there are no other questions, and can I ask us to agree the report?
Agreed.
We're agreed. Can I come now to item 8, which is on breastfeeding and our return to work policy, and I'm going to invite Elaine Maxwell to speak to this item. Elaine.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, Committee. The purpose of this report is to provide you all with an update on the revised breastfeeding and return to work policy, as well as advising you of the Council registering for the Breastfeeding Friendly Scotland scheme, and to advise you on the next steps to become an accredited breastfeeding friendly employer. With all of this showing the Council's commitment to encouraging a supportive culture towards breastfeeding as an employer and local authority. As detailed in Section 3 of the report, the Council is already registered with the Breastfeeding Friendly Scotland scheme, and the Council will be applying to become an accredited breastfeeding friendly employer, and will, as highlighted at Section 3.4 of the report, be providing the updated breastfeeding friendly and return to work policy will be form part of the Council's submission. Section 4 of the report notes the key updates and changes to the policies, and these include clear guidance for managers to support employees who are continuing to breastfeed on their return to work, providing wellbeing and information, and appropriate signposting and resources for our employees. The improvements to the policy aim to enable the manager to take forward a safe, healthy and supportive return to work for the employee, and indeed aims to ensure all pregnant and breastfeeding employees feel confident about their return to work. Additionally, in linking to the breastfeeding friendly scheme, the policy makes employees aware that those wishing to breastfeed can use public accessible council premises, and employees within these buildings who interact with the public are reminded of the importance of being helpful and supportive to those seeking to come into the council buildings to breastfeed their baby. Information on how employees should manage this will be communicated along with the updated policy and breastfeeding friendly scheme information. Section 5 highlights the next steps to be taken on approval by committee, and this includes communication on the policy to employees and managers, and will also include a dedicated breastfeeding friendly intranet page. Section 5.2 of the report advises that the Council will submit the Breastfeeding Friendly Scotland application once the official framework for this is available. With finally at Section 5.4 of the report, if the updated policy is approved, an employee survey will be scheduled to take place 2 years from when it is formally issued to all employees. And this will assist the Council in understanding its application, impact and any cultural shifts towards breastfeeding. And with that, I would refer you back to section 2 of the report and ask that the breastfeeding and return to work policy be approved, to note the Council registering from the Breastfeeding Friendly Scotland scheme, and to note the Council's next steps as detailed to submit its application for becoming an accredited Breastfeeding Friendly Scotland employer in the coming months. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for that report. Can I ask if there are any questions? Could I come to Gladys Miller?
Thanks, Chair. I have a comment rather than a question. I'd like to welcome the proposed breastfeeding and return to work policy as a strong reflection of the Council's ongoing commitment to supporting the health and well-being of our employees and their families. And I believe that the policy will foster a real positive, inclusive and supportive workplace environment for breastfeeding parents returning to work, ensuring that they feel respected, valued and empowered to successfully balance their professional and their family responsibilities. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, thank you for your comments there, Councillor. Could I come to Leslie MacDonald?
Thanks, Chair. I too want to support this report. Absolutely delighted to do so. This policy applies to all our employees, ensuring understanding and support to all those who intend to breastfeed, and for that I'm absolutely delighted with it. Putting more emphasis on this, the Council had, I believe, registered in October 2024 for the Breastfeeding Friendly Scotland scheme, and we are now submitting an application to become an accredited bronze Breastfeeding Friendly Scotland employer in the near future. And I am really pleased with this, and I am certain that everybody here will support me in welcoming this policy. Thanks to all involved.
Thank you very much for your comments. Could I, if there are no other questions, bring us back to the recommendations, and can I ask us to agree the report?
Agreed.
We're agreed. Thank you very much. Can I come now to item 9, which are the recommendations referred by the by resource committees, and can I ask Ian Strachan to speak to that item?
Thank you. Morning, members of the committee. The purpose of the report is to request approval of the recommendations referred to this committee. So the recommendation from the Housing and Technical Resources Committee on 26 February, that the revised South Lanarkshire Council housing repairs policy be approved for implementation from the 5th of May this year. And the recommendation from the Social Work Resources Committee of 26 March, that the proposed changes to the current adoption allowance scheme be approved. There's more detail on each of the reports in sections 3 and 4. A link to those reports, a link to the IIAs, and we're asking committee to approve the following recommendations: that the housing repairs policy be approved for implementation from 5th of May, and that the proposed changes to the adoption allowance scheme be approved as referred. Happy to take any questions, and we've got service area representatives as well.
Okay, thank you very much. Are there any questions on this item? I'm not seeing any questions, so can I ask us to agree the report?
Agreed.
We're agreed. Can I come now to item 10, which is on the composition of the council and membership places, and again ask Ian to speak to the report.
Thank you. Purpose of the report to advise recent change to the composition of the council following the resignation of Councillor Corbett from the Conservative Group to join Reform UK, and the proposed allocation of committee places. The composition of the council has changed slightly. We've reviewed the allocation of committee places. The current composition is as set out at 3.3. There's no statutory requirement, as members will be aware, in terms of allocating membership places, but we do endeavour to reflect the overall political balance in doing so. Following review, the political composition of most committees and forms remains unaffected. However, the Rural Task Force, following a review of that at 4.2, it's proposed that one of the places held by the Conservative Group is allocated to Reform UK. In addition, at section 5, Councillor Lambie, as leader of the Reform UK Group, is now entitled to a place on the Community Wealth Building Commission. At section 6, following a recent communication from COSLA requesting confirmation of Council's membership, undertaking a review of those as well. And again, based on current political balance, as outlined at 3.3, one of places currently held by the SNP group should be allocated to the Liberal Democrats, and we've set out the proposed composition there. Additionally, just a verbal update. Councillor Lambie's intimated his resignation from the Clydesdale Licensing Board, and Councillor Corbett has intimated her willingness to take that position. So then, with the recommendations, I wouldn't propose to read all those out, save that they reflect what's in the report, but also to add in with the committee's agreement that noting Councillor Lambie's resignation and improving his replacement on the Clydesdale Licensing Board by Councillor Corbett. But I'm happy to take any questions.
Can I ask if there are any questions on the report? I don't see any questions. So with that verbal revision that Ian has just outlined, are we content to approve the recommendations in the report?
Agreed.
We are agreed. Thank you very much. I'll come now to item 11, which is a nomination of trustee to South Lanarkshire Leisure and Culture Board, and back to Ian to speak to that item.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, purpose of the report requesting approval for the nomination of a trustee to the SLLC board. There's currently 3 vacant positions for elected members or officers on the board. Councillor Nelson has intimated his interest in appointment and looking for committee's approval to Councillor Nelson filling one of those vacant trustee positions. Happy to take any questions.
Okay, thank you very much. Are there any questions on this report? I'm not seeing any questions, so can we agree the recommendations?
Agreed.
We're agreed. I'll come now to item 12. This is the first of our items for noting. This is on the Scottish Government's call for evidence to inform the National Tackling Child Poverty Delivery Plan from 2026 to 2031, and I'm going to ask Anne Donaldson to speak to the report. Anne.
Thank you, Chair. The purpose of this report is to inform committee of the response from South Lanarkshire Council to the call for evidence from the Scottish Government to inform the next National Child Poverty Delivery Plan 2026 to 31. Section 3 gives the background to the report and describes how the Child Poverty Scotland Act 2017 sets the Scottish Government's targets to reduce the number of children experiencing the effects of poverty by 2030 and requires Scottish ministers and public bodies to create delivery plans and reports to meet those targets. Paragraph 3.5 confirms that feedback from the Scottish Government's Improvement Service on the South Lanarkshire Local Child Poverty Action Report continues to be overwhelmingly positive. Paragraph 3.6 describes how the Council has worked closely with NHS Lanarkshire and other partners to produce a single report, recognising that a collective effort is likely to be more impactful. Paragraph 3.8 describes how the work of the partnership is informed by a national delivery plan, with the previous plan Every Child, Every Chance and current plan Best Start, Bright Futures having a focus on addressing the 3 drivers of child poverty reduction: income from employment, costs of living and income from social security and benefits in kind. Section 4 details the call for evidence to help scope out the next delivery plan from 26 to 31. The call for evidence was made on the 25th of February 25, with final date for submissions on 28th of March 25. Given the timescale, the South Lanarkshire submission was shared with chairs of education resources, housing and technical resources and social work resources prior to submission on the 28th of March and is now presented to Executive Committee for noting. As detailed in paragraph 4.5, I would ask members to note that in compiling the response, there was extensive participation from across the partnership, including from education, social work, housing and technical resources, NHS Lanarkshire, Skills Development Scotland, the Department of Work and Pensions, Social Security Scotland and third sector organisations. Turning then to the recommendation detailed in section 2, paragraph 2.1, the committee is asked to approve the following recommendation: that the response attached as Appendix 1 be noted. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. Anne, can I ask if there are any questions in this report? Could you indicate now? And I'll come to John Ross.
Yes, thanks very much, Chair. It's not so much, it's more a comment than anything else. I really do welcome this report. I know it may seem quite time-consuming for our officers to prepare things like this, but I do welcome the fact that the Scottish Government is asking us as a local authority to give them identifiable information to set future policy. And I welcome their continuing way of doing this. I think it's beneficial for us as a local authority to be asked for these reports, even though, as I say, it may be time consuming. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much. And could I come to Councillor Robb?
Thank you. Really interesting report and interesting reading the detail of what the collaborative partners involved have identified that can impact on child poverty. I'm presuming some of those issues can also be dealt with locally. So what I wanted to ask was when we're due for our next update on the local child poverty action plan, and if some of those interesting thought-provoking points that officers and of the different agencies have come up with could be incorporated into what we can do locally as well. For example, a whole systems approach. How does transport impact on child poverty? Are we going to do gender budgeting in this council? Looking at investment in community workers to have that whole systems holistic approach, look at preventative services. So it's just to see when we get the next local update and how we can take into consideration some of these points that could be addressed locally as well. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Anne?
I can check the date and get back to you, Councillor Robb. In terms of what's reported, it will be what's set out in the plan, so I would expect any targets that are set or any actions stated to be reported in the next update. I'll certainly get the date back to you, that's not a problem.
Thank you. Yeah, we've still got a way to go. South Lanarkshire's child poverty rate, I think, is around 20%, so it'd be good to see increased action on this.
Okay, thank you very much. Could I come to Margaret Walker?
Thanks, Chair. It's just to say I think the response actually does a really excellent job in terms of pulling together all the areas of work that's taking place within the different policy areas around child poverty. And I think to do that in 9 pages is absolutely excellent. And maybe this is a case as well where the Marmot project is going to come into play and looking at what is most effective and what's making the most impact. So I think all of that, and we have the various performance and audit suites that go to various committees. So I'm assuming Marmot, you will have a role in terms of an overview of all of that and making recommendations in terms of what is most effective and what makes the most impact. And I also would hope that the Scottish Government takes note of the comments that are made in Section 4 around the national funding systems that are in place. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for that comment. And the only observation I was going to make is just reflecting on the conversation we've just had about the employability promise and the conversation we just had about the Connect plan, the mid-term review of Connect. To pick up the point that Councillor Walker's made, this submission that we made to the Scottish Government really does capture all those different areas with rurality, the benefits of that sort of key worker model. It just captures so much of the work that we're doing as a local authority, and I think does it very well. But also has quite rightly a challenge around advice services and funding. That is in there as well. Okay, if there are no other questions on the report, can we note the report and come to the next item, which is South Lanarkshire's Integration Joint Board Strategic Commissioning Plan for 2025 to 2028, and Suman Sengupta is going to speak to this report. Suman.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, members. So, as is set out within what I hope is a self-explanatory report, integration joint boards are required to prepare a 3-year strategic commissioning plan under the Public Body Joint Working Act. As is set out in 3.3, work has been underway within South Lanarkshire then to progress that, with the South Lanarkshire IGB approving the appended strategic commissioning plan for 25 to 28 at its March 2025 meeting. The SUP is brought to the Executive Committee of the Council for noting as a key partner in its delivery through the auspices of the Health and Social Care Partnership, in a similar vein to a parallel paper having been taken to the NHS Lanarkshire Health Board. Section 4 of the report outlines the steps taken to prepare this in line with the Scottish Government guidance in respect to the preparation of such documents. Before then, under section 4.7, setting out the 5 key priority areas, strategic goals for the next 3 years in respect to the work of the Strategic Commissioning Plan and the Health and Social Care Partnership in particular. Later on within the report, an explanation is also provided from 4.12 onwards in respect of the particular styling of the report, which has been based on feedback that we've received about making sure that we were succinct, clear, we were demonstrating connectivity with existing information, we were increasingly visual, and critically, we were focused on the strategic activities that need to be undertaken over the medium term. Finally, I would draw members back actually to 4.11, which very much connects to the point that Tom raised earlier on in respect to both the Council Connect plan, but also the wider action that's been referred to within the meeting room, respect to the community planning partnership that we've set out, what the longer term collaborative ambition is, not just for the IGB, but I hope with our partners, which is to improve life expectancy by 2035, while reducing the life expectancy gap between the most deprived areas and the national average. And with that, I'm very happy to answer any members' questions, and I will take you back to the recommendations under section at the beginning of the report. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. Can I ask if there are any questions in this report? And can I come to Councillor Robb?
Thank you again. Thanks very much, Suman. Really welcome the long-term ambition, taking us beyond crisis and into what we actually want to achieve for people's health as well. That will obviously take a lot of emphasis on preventative approach, helping people manage their own health and healthy lives as well. And that needs a whole system approach. All the council services, all the community planning partners, looking at what creates the conditions for good health. So to that end, I wanted to ask, where is prevention in the strategic goals of the IGB? And also, will the IGB be also working on the fair funding principles and developing the relationship with the voluntary sector to try and boost those preventative services? Thanks.
Okay, Suman.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Robb, for those very timely questions. In terms of your initial point then in respect to prevention, there's three components to that. Firstly, it's important to recognise within increasingly large proportions of our services, it's about the emphasis that's placed on prevention in terms of the day-to-day work within those services, and certainly we've provided examples of that through other documentations and reports of how we're increasingly seeking to do that. That's number one. Number two, in terms of the strategic goals you'll set out, the first one is a very much focus on early years and indeed childhood development. So again, I would highlight that that is a key aspect in terms of the preventative actions, and indeed that is totally supported by the evidence base, including the recommendations of the World Health Organization. In terms of then of more specific initiatives and developments that we would, I feel like, more commonly label as prevention, what I would highlight, and I think a number of members have heard me say this before, that this is then a wider challenge across Scotland in respect of how we address this, because fundamentally that will require resources that we are all struggling to allocate here. Audit Scotland has highlighted that something for health and social care partnerships across Scotland, because of a budget deficit in the region of £500 million and the necessity to focus on core and statutory obligations, that increasingly there is less resource available to identify for specific preventative initiatives. Hence why within this document we are looking very much about how we address this through our core service delivery, and indeed that real emphasis on early years. The other part then was your question about the third sector relationship. So we just kind of highlight that the IGB itself doesn't contract directly with provider organisations. The Health and Social Care Partnership uses the processes of either NHS Lanarkshire with regards to its healthcare budgets, or South Lanarkshire Council with regards to its social care expenditure. So the approach that we undertaken through the Health and Social Care Partnership would absolutely be in line with the requirements of the Council as agreed to the processes here. I hope that's helpful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. If there are no other questions, can I come back to the recommendations? Can we note the report? Agreed. Agreed. Can I come now to item 14, which is South Lanarkshire Council's net zero route map with scope 1 organisational emissions, and David Booth is going to speak to this item. David.
Thank you very much, Chair, and I'm joined this morning by Catherine McCafford, who is the Carbon Management Officer. In terms of the report itself, this is a report which was previously taken to the Climate Change and Sustainability Committee on the 19th of March. The purpose of the report is to update the committee on the new climate change legislation and forthcoming changes to national reduction targets, to update on the position of the Council in relation to reducing organisational carbon emissions, and to update on an agreed proposal to develop the South Lanarkshire Council Net Zero route map for Scope 1 organisational emissions. Section 3 of the report provides background, including the legislative framework the Council is working within and the recent legislative changes to emission reduction targets. A principle amongst them is an acceptance that the Scotland's interim reduction targets for 2030 is beyond what can be achieved. The report focuses on Scope 1 emissions, and for clarity, Scope 1 emissions are direct emissions, organisational direct emissions that the Council from its own as an organisation in its own right, and these are direct emissions that include emissions from property heated by gas and oil and emissions from petrol and diesel fleet vehicles. Scope 2 emissions are indirect emissions and are associated with the consumption of purchased electricity and emissions that are arising from procurement of goods and services from third-party contractors. Sections 3.4 to 3.6 of the report document the significant progress made to date by the Council to reduce carbon, which amounts to 68.9% of its carbon emissions since the baseline year was set at 2005-2006. Scope 1 emissions account for 62.5% of the Council's overall current carbon footprint, and Section 4 of this report provides an assessment of South Lanarkshire Council Services' current efforts to reduce Scope 1 carbon emissions and likely future progress. 4.1 of the report highlights our building and council estate, which accounts for 69.2% of the Council's overall carbon footprint and 77% of the Council's current Scope 1 emissions. And that's a result of the properties being heated by gas and oil. Section 4 then goes through and provides some more information around about some of the key achievements that have taken place already in terms of reducing the Scope 1 emissions in council property, and those are contained in 4.14 of the report. And in 4.15 of the report, the next steps for the council estate are highlighted. These cover two main areas, the first of which is the Council producing its first local heat and energy efficiency strategy, which sets out a long-term plan for decarbonised heating buildings and improving energy across the entire local authority area. Secondly, committee will be aware that there is a property and estates review underway which aims to deliver a strategic approach to optimising the council's estate. An initial report on the work undertaken in phase 1 of this review was presented to Executive Committee on the 12th of March. Section 4.18 outlines some of the challenges to delivery around about our properties. The Council has approximately 300 properties with fossil fuel heating systems which will be difficult to decarbonise due to several challenges, not least amongst them is the level of investment required to transition the council estate to net zero, which is around £927 million at 2023 prices. The second area within the Scope 1 emissions is the council fleet, and the council's fleet accounts for 14.4% of council's overall carbon footprint and 23% of the Scope 1 emissions. The council fleet management is a key aspect of council operations and underpins the delivery of a multitude of essential services that the council provides. Once again, the reductions to date that have been carried out in terms of the fleet services is covered in the report in section 4.2.4, and section 4.2.5 highlights the next step for the council fleet in reducing carbon emissions. And this includes a renewed focus on the vehicle replacement programme to ensure that as far as practicable and given where available proven technology, a modern and reliable fleet will continue to drive down emissions, and a recognition that replacing aged, unreliable vehicles will reduce maintenance costs and will offer further opportunities to produce ultra-low emission vehicles. Turning to the next steps for developing the Scope 1 emissions route map, and that's covered in section 4.3 of the report. And that highlights that there are numerous work streams progressing involving key services which contribute to council carbon emissions, and these will inform the council's net zero journey. However, the Council will not reach the net zero emissions target by 2045 at its current pace of emission reductions, and that's highlighted in a table at the top of page 180 of the report. It is proposed, therefore, that Scope 1 emissions will be the focus of the first phase of emission reduction mapping, as the Council aims to reduce these emissions in line with the national legislation. The route map will not only address the Council's legislative obligations outlined in paragraphs 3.2 and 3.3 of the report, but also address the recommendations of Audit Scotland report on the Council's approach, Scotland Council's approach to addressing climate change, which was published in September 2022 and is referenced in section 4.3.3 of the report. The route map will be developed in cognisance with other statutory service strategies and highlight significant financial investment to achieve net zero, detailing costs and potential sources of finance. In the first instance, a 3 to 5 year route map would be developed. In terms of financial implications, as I have highlighted, carbon reduction have been achieved up to date within the current budgets and from ad hoc capital funds. However, without significant financial investment, the Council will not be able to meet its challenging national net zero carbon targets. In terms of other implications, it's highlighted that failure to meet sustainable development and climate change objectives is one of the Council's top risks. With that, I will take you, committee, back to section 2 of the report and the recommendations, and those are that the publication of the Climate Change Emissions Reduction Targets Act 2024 is noted, that the Council's position to date in reducing the organisational carbon emissions is noted, and that the decision by the Climate Change and Sustainability Committee on the 19th of March to approve the development of a Council net zero route map for Scope 1 and organisational emissions is noted. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, David, for that report. Can I ask if there are any questions, and could I come to Kirsten Robb?
Thank you again. Last bit. So thanks very much to the team and everyone across the council who's working on sustainability, really, as a whole council thing. I wanted to ask, make the point that is highlighted in the report about the Office for Budget Responsibility, talking about how early action is important and it's cheaper to do things now rather than later on, because we're starting to see the impact of these things, of climate change now. In particular, in 4.2.2, I note that we had to phase out use of fossil fuels in light vehicles by this year, and we've reached 30% electric now. So I was going to ask, what are the plans to meet that target as soon as possible? And also what the date is for the net zero route map, so we can start to take those early actions as the OBR suggests. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Could I come back to David to deal with that?
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you very much, Councillor Robb. In terms of fleet, you're right to highlight the significant progress that we've made to date in terms of electrifying the Council's fleet, and we continue to look at the fleet, and we're undertaking a review of fleet services at this particular moment. That in terms of how we will get those figures down, so they will be included in this route map that we're working on. So in terms of the route to getting that will be developed through this route map itself. In terms of timescales, we're working across a range of areas across the Council in terms of fleet and also in terms of the property portfolio of the Council. And we'll need to line that up with the outcomes of the property estate review, which, as I say, was reported to in March of this year, and I understand that further reports will be coming forward to the Council in due course. So we'll be lining up our reduction route map in line with those other strategic work that the Council is undertaking. I hope that answers that.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. And I suppose that I would emphasise, as I always do in these papers, two things. One, the need for us to be upfront about our trajectory, which this paper is, and there's good progress. But we've got to be honest about where our trajectory is taking us, because it's not taking us to the towards the targets that have been set as a whole. And also, I think the financial implications, I think we've got to confront this issue of if you're going to fund a transition, how you're going to fund a transition, and just the fact that we're not really being realistic as a country about what's involved in funding a transition. Obviously, points to be made about you know, where are our supply chains, etc., and the need to develop them and densify them and all the rest of it. But fundamentally, we are not seeing enough progress on providing local government or the rest of the public sector with the vehicles, with the investment vehicles that allow us to power ahead with the transition that we need to. However, I will come back to the recommendations. Can we agree the report? Agreed. We are agreed. At this point, I'm going to take a short break, if that's all right, for 5 minutes. Before we come to the remaining items, which will be taken in private. So I'll see you in 5 minutes. Okay, folks, we're going to make a start. Could you resume your seats, please? Okay, I'll come now to item 15, which is urgent business. There were no items of urgent business. Item 16 concerns the exclusion of the press and the public. As the remaining items of business may involve the likely disclosure of exempt information in terms of paragraphs 6 and 9 of Part 1 of Schedule 7A of the Local Government Scotland Act 1973, which I'm sure you're all familiar with, members are asked to agree that the press and public be excluded from the meeting and for those items of business. So can I ask the clerk just to ensure we've got no press or public present and confirm that the recording and live streaming have been stopped? Yeah. Okay, and can I ask